Board of Sign Language Interpreters Rules Advisory Committee meeting is convening at 9:41 p.m. on May 28th, 2025. This meeting is being held in person and through Zoom video conference and is being recorded. The recording will be posted to the internet for public use. I will now call roll. Darcy? Here. Natalie? Here. Mel? Here. Lori? Here. Caitlin? Here. Tiffany? Here. Amber?
Here. Here.
Anna? Here. Dan, here. Vanessa? Here. So, Masha? Maya. Maya. That's not what right. And Maya. Members, when you wish to speak, please state your last name. No, state your first name for the record. Committee members are asked to not use the chat feature during meetings. The licensing office asks individuals attending through Zoom to keep their phones muted and cameras off during the entire meeting or until they are given the opportunity to comment during the public and interested parties feedback period, if indicated on the agenda. The public comment is limited to matters listed on the meeting agenda or topics relevant to what this committee has statutory authority to regulate. Public members wishing to speak, please sign in on the roster sheet available in the room or email Josh Page at josh.page@oha.oregon.gov and provide your first and last name. Everyone is asked to use appropriate language and standards and protocols when conducting committee business. Meeting is now called to order. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good to see everybody. It's fine Wednesday. So the agenda. So we have, first thing we have is some legal advice, and it is going to be related to the rules and skipping the legal advice. But the stuff we worked on last time, which was related to the exemptions, emergency services, and extenuating circumstances, was Senate Bill 90 now being signed by the president and the speaker. The current statute and that bill, we're going to need more legal analysis on it. When they start to merge, we want to make sure we're giving you accurate information instead of giving you the information now that may change after 9 days. So we don't want to be misleading or hard more legal and now all that. So we're going to skip that today. And then we're going to dive right into other legal advice regarding something else. Any questions? Okay, I will read the script whenever Josh is ready. Will I read it in public session, right? Yes. The Board of Sign Language Interpreters Rules Advisory Committee will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.6602F, ORS 192.355.9A, and ORS 40225 for the purpose of considering information exempt from public disclosure at 9:45 a.m. on May 28, 2025. Representatives of the news media shall be allowed to attend executive session. Audience members attending through Zoom will now be moved into a separate breakout room, and audience members attending in person are asked to be in the room for the duration of the executive session. Those authorized to attend executive session, please continue to keep your phones muted and cameras on. Are there any representatives of the media? No. Recognizing there's no news media in attendance, the public will be moved into a separate breakout room for the duration of the executive session. We will return to open session for taking any final action or making any final decisions. It is estimated that the committee will return to public session in 20 minutes, so 10:05, 10:10. Please be aware that it's possible the committee's executive session may last longer than 20 minutes. If the public has any questions about whether the committee is still in executive session, then they can contact Josh Page at josh.page@ oha.oregon.gov. We are now in executive session.
Amber got her hand up.
Amber has her hand up.
Amber has her hand up.
Hi there, this is
Amber?
Amber. Yes, this is Amber Quall speaking. I just wanted to make sure that I was acknowledged to be put into the executive session.
The Board of Sign Language Interpreters Rules Advisory Committee will now exit executive session and reconvene open session at 10:45 a.m. No final decisions were made and no votes were taken in executive session. Will be moved from the vacant breakout room back into the meeting. Representatives, the meeting, if they want to see it, all of the main discussions and actions. Were there any procedural questions that people you have that you have? This is Christy. Christy. Think about.
Like, we're gonna Christy.
Yeah.
So who I am, yep. I'm just thinking about all of the rich conversations and the dialogue and the trying to go from the bigger picture to the narrow picture. And can you refresh my memory on how long the RAC and then the board serves? I'm just thinking if we really do want to make sure we get it right because of course, the new board has to learn all the things, but they don't have the historical of what went into determining these things. So if you could just refresh my memory on our service term and what that looks like.
Each board member term is dedicated in statute, so I believe they serve 2, 3 or 4-year terms. And RACs don't have terms, so they can go forever, so that's not. It's by subject matter, so like, the RAC is gonna be starting about legend drugs and devices, so we're gonna have people that are familiar with that arena doing that. So usually we change, but in this situation, we're kind of doing everything, so you guys are staying around a while. And I've had, like, the aesthetics and advanced aesthetics RAC went for several years. So there's no end time. But you could resign if you want.
No, no, I'm committed, but I was hoping for a shorter sentence. No good.
During your thing, 2 3-year terms is what board members serve. I mean, the first terms are, some of them are staggered, so
That's right.
1 year and then they'll go to 3.
Then where are we at on board membership?
Do
we even have a quorum?
So I do have a member that I will be recommending for the board member, but we still need a licensed interpreter from this association representative, and then we need a deaf hard hearing.
And I personally reached out and I asked several things. Said, can you recommend somebody? Can you put this on your licensing webpage? This is after the board meeting and how they provide us a lot of comments and recommendations. So we did.
So there's currently 4.
And their next meeting will be August 20th at 4 p.m.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
This is Caitlin. In regards to that, if there is a chance that another waiver will be set up, how does that happen before their board? Are we gonna have 2 months where there's no waiver and everybody needs their licenses, or how does that work?
make the decision within the next. I mean, we've decided it will likely be extended, but the timing is how.
Got it.
We're trying to look at 950, if that's in the past, and
And could you speak up a little more?
yeah, so we're likely the limited waiver will be extended, but we're kind of looking at timing. You want to do it for just 6 months? Is that enough time? We're gonna have to revisit it again. So Mia and Bob and Tina, and we're just kind of putting the final. But yes, everybody's emailing me and everybody's asking. It will go out, I promise. But yeah, we're going to extend it. We're just kind of waiting. I think some 18 months a year. No, I mean 18 months, 8 months, 9 months a year.
This is Lori. I'm just wondering, we are now aligned with ODE with respect to educational licenses, so if that waiver gets extended. That applies also to the educational license, correct?
I mean, their rule's pretty vague now.
Does not waive ODE rules, but it just waives, in terms of enforcement of the requirement to be licensed that HLO would not enforce in that particular circumstance. But the person would still need to meet any ODE.
But a year ago, we were off timing wise, so I just wanted to make sure that I thought that ODE had basically said whatever HLO says.
I think Georgianne's on.
I
Was on.
am. I didn't want to talk until someone
Yeah.
said my name. Yes, it is written in a way that we're good to go, whatever we need. And hopefully we'll figure it out.
This is Christy. Hi, Georgianne. Can I ask you a clarifying question? When you say we're good to go, can you be really specific? on what that means?
Absolutely. Our requirements are leaning, they are the old requirements. Actually less than the old requirements. So there is still the requirement for the EIPA testing, but there's, again, it's not being monitored and it is not licensure. So is that more clear, Christy?
That is, thank you. One more follow-up question. Are you going to add back in the 12 hours required PDUs or?
No, we
CPU
won't
hours?
add that back in, because it will go to HLO once this licensure gets done. It won't be us anymore. So there's no sense in adding it in for the rest of the time we need to get this licensure on the road. Does that make sense? We will have no requirement for interpreters. We will have the requirement of having a license through HLO. So is that I would say that you want to look at putting that into licensure if that's an important piece.
This is Sandy. A couple things. You guys haven't actually worked on the education license, and if 950 passes,
Yeah.
it will be reviewed. So there's that kind of.
Oh, I doubt,
several-
Wendy, that she'll be able to.
I have several questions kind of around that repeal, and it goes out till 2029. So I don't know how that's going to shake out, but
This is Christy. I think I might be missing something. Okay, so if educational interpreters do not need to be licensed under HLO.
They will still require to.
And-
They will still be required to be licensed. There's just not a special license.
They'll have to be
Yeah.
your general.
they'll be in training, provisional.
Aha,
So there's. will
so
be a
we've
transition.
removed educational and now they have fit. Right.
And they have till 2029 to make that transition.
Got it, much more clear. Thank you.
And I think there's going to have to be some communication before the bill goes into place, but I don't have all the facts yet, so, but I am aware of it, and I will be working with Bob and Heather to get that out, because things. like having held the official. So I have those kind of questions, but they're on my radar. Do you guys want to step into the generalist license? Do you have any other questions about, procedural rules type stuff?
This is Amanda. The procedural thing that I want to talk about is we're in a limbo space of passed, not signed, SB 950. But we know some stuff, so I don't want to work on anything that's going to be repealed.
Absolutely.
Okay, I just wanted to put that up there.
Yeah, I have an email list on up, and then if you get that far, then we'll do it.
And generalist was not touched.
No.
Okay.
They took away the renewal limitation.
Gotcha. I just can't repeat all of that.
Yeah, I am going to, I think we'll sign this week by the governor, so we will ask for some information. So I think it'll be this week or early next week. Which doesn't happen that often. We get them signed right away, but it's very nice.
This is Christy. Can someone remind me in 950? The amendments, does it identify the qualifications of the licenses? Okay. I'm just, Lori and I were noting that for generalist is 4.0. And of course, I'm gonna bring us back at some point to that rich conversation around squeezing people out of the profession and the
Yeah.
education.
You know, that language stays the same for generalist and certified. Minimum or minimum qualification.
Caitlin was for a sec, then we'll go
I'll
on to
go.
Yeah.
So my understanding of 950 is that they were intending for the specialty settings to still have their rules and to count on that for if you could work in that setting. So if a provisional license holder had a 3.5 EIPA, they could still work in education because that's what education said was fine. That was my understanding.
But they went away.
Right, that's what I'm saying, is that now I don't know what's going on.
I think what they meant and what they did are very different.
Yeah.
They maybe forgot. Talk with anyone.
This is Amanda, another 950 question. Is provisional now more open? Does it not say can't do education? So we could have provisional with a 3.5 and generalist with 4.0 or something like that. Like we could do something with that. So the provisional can work in education. We're not defining settings anymore. Correct.
No, it's not true.
Okay.
But that will be more to come.
I'm gonna open a bookstore. Anyone wanna?
Yes.
Okay,
I am your girl. I've
Awesome.
already started a nonprofit.
let's do it. No, dogs.
And for the educational interpreter, the alternative pathways. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hold one moment when switching to the motion.
Don't know about it.
Oh my gosh.
You guys have a sense of how you want to, well, a couple things. Interpreters, we're gonna have a break about 15 minutes. We can do that now. And then get into the generalist after that.
Yeah.
15-minute break, okay? Okay, great. Yep. And the generalist rule. So currently there's 3 pathways. One is for exams, one is for credentials, and then one is for experience and exams. So do you guys have, and the question has been asked, basically, how is there a way to condense this giant list that the RID recognizes of different credentials? And if there is, can we do that? One of those ways is to list examinations. One of those ways is to list, these are all the requirements that we want you to have that may include an exam. Or you could stick the list in the credentials and put a time frame on it, everybody before this date. So you have some options.
This is Amanda. I think we keep pathway 2 and talk about including all of the requirements up until this date, whatever, June 1st, whatever it is, this date that it passes, because I think this is actually the shorter way to include all those people than if we were to pull out all the tests that they had to take and list those, right? And then I would like to figure out a way to get the BEI tests under pathway 1. The challenge is that it's a little bit different than the CASLI. So the CASLI has a knowledge exam and a performance exam. And the BEI has a test of English proficiency and a performance exam. So they're slightly different.
I have it already.
Beautiful. Well, then
I don't
tell me to
remember
shut
right
up
because
then.
Hey, thanks, Lori. I have the BEI test of English proficiency and BEI performance test, basic and
Perfect.
advanced math.
Thank you.
Basic and what?
I was listening, basic, advanced, and master. But I think Sammy, I would agree with trying to list all the exams. It's not easy to even find if an exam was taken for some of those. It's received in 1988.
Right.
I found some historical stuff in Alabama and Iowa, but I don't know what testing. I know when they're issued.
We're adopting these. Yeah, it doesn't matter. People already licensed.
I'd like to get some clarification. I need some clarification on what Amanda mentioned about adding to pathway 1, adding the BEI test to pathway 1. That's what was discussed, right? I'm in agreement to add that to pathway 1. Also, if, let's see. Okay, I was thinking about under pathway 1, adding the BEI exam. So just have it there, just that simple addition. And then this is just hypothetically, if RID does go down in flames, those who have passed the CASLI to get their RID credential certification, if RID folds, hopefully that CASLI organization at least would become a separately operated testing organization like the BEI and the EIPA. And in that way, interpreters would be able to continue getting certification or credentialing through CASLI. So, and then they would be able to follow pathway 1 if the RID folded. So either way, they're covered. They would still be able to be a licensed interpreter ongoing. I think we need to add the RID as well. Because yes, if someone has applied now, if the RID folds, they are able to renew their license, that'll be fine. But if another individual from, let's say, a different state moves in state, and this is their first time applying for this license, and yet they have an old certificate, it would be nice to add the RID test into pathway 1 as well.
Access all of them?
You know, the RID test, just RID test, make it vague enough. And would that be that's under pathway 2, Darcy says. Well, if RID goes under, if there's somebody from another state who's been interpreting, and Darcy says, oh, so it's somebody who in the past.
Keeping all the ones that are grandfathered.
Yeah. So it says Casley, but if I took the RID test.
That's under pathway 2.
Pathway 2 wouldn't work for me, might not work for me.
So it's staying.
Okay, all right, okay.
Yeah, RID.
That's-
It's an open bookstore.
They already asked me to get the RID certificates to pass the test. They don't actually have a test.
They did.
They did, absolutely, and they're still recognized. But I can't find what test they took to achieve those.
Caitlin, so I just want to clarify along with Mel. What if, because this is a credential, but if the certificate is no longer good, then how do you prove that? Because the certificate is from RID. If RID is gone, that certificate is also gone. Correct?
This is Sammy. I don't know that we can write rules on hypotheticals. I mean, we know that they existed at one time. We're gonna have to wait and see if that happens. Hopefully they'll give us some notice. We can change the rules that way. Yeah, do you guys think it's gonna go away?
I think it'll morph. This is Amanda. I'm also reading that it says submit proof of holding one of the following credentials. It doesn't actually say it has to be active right now. Unless holding means active. But like, I have my piece of paper that shows I have a certificate, an NIC, right? So even if it's not valid because the organization is gone, I have proof that I had it.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can submit.
No, because I actually have a piece of paper that says certification master. And it says. Of credential.
But if the organization that my membership is active under is no longer an organization.
But then you have past proof.
Why would you, it stopped, your thing was still good, so that grandfathered in because it was previous, right?
Yes.
No, should, from the rules, right?
Now, the rule, if you had obtained your RID national recruiting certificate, and that's what you're using to apply, and RID goes down, you still have that certificate, and as long as it's one of the ones that's adopted in the rule, you're good, regardless of whether that entity is no longer there.
So this is Amanda. I would also say the only reason, how am I gonna say this? RID requires us to have membership with RID in order for our certification to be valid.
Mhm.
If RID no longer exists, that doesn't invalidate the certificate, because that's an RID rule. right? And then also, I would say, I'm gonna go back to Sammy saying, like, we can't write a rule for a hypothetical, that would be an amendment later. Correct? Right. Yeah.
This is Darcy. Under policy as well. At Marihurst University, yeah, but for example, when they shut down, people who receive degrees, bachelors of arts, of science, they hold their degrees still, the degrees are still valid, correct? So, because you graduated regardless of the institution holding, so it is still recognized as a degree. So I think the certificate as well should still be recognized. And Amanda says, I agree. Now, and, not but and, under pathway 1, from what I understand, that means I've passed this test, this exam. Under pathway 2, I have passed the exams. I've also paid and taken courses, workshops to be an active certified member. And for me, they're separate, different pathways. And I understand the point about the degree, yes. And to me, a degree is kind of in the same grouping as an exam. Pathway 2 would be if I'm an active member, an active participating member in the field, due paying, workshop taking, CEU taking individual. So if the RID folds, then we would be filed under, that would be under pathway 1. This is Amanda. In reality, right now, RID is still in functioning status, correct? If RID folds, then the rules would just change. The rule would have to change. Because there's no way for me to maintain my credential in an organization that does not exist anymore. So yes, I can show that I'm active to that point, which means I'm active. And if if right now I disregard the national organization, I still pass the exams, which is good. I'm pathway 1, and I'm practicing good. And if I'm a due paying member and I have that credential in good faith and the organization folds, I still have my credential.
Well, we're gonna pause for a switch. Sorry.
This is Caitlin. We've already recognized pathway 1, pathway 2. So those are equivalent, and that's fine. So if our ID does fold, then the certifications are still there. It's like the equivalent of having the degree, like you mentioned. I'll just expect it. But you're still thinking about it at the same time. It's good to have that question.
We're gonna wait over here.
Well, how would you, Sammy, want it to be different? What would need to change in pathway 1 to meet the way you're talking about?
Under pathway 1, I would, if we're gonna add BEI, I would actually want to literally add RID. So it's RID, BEI, EIPA.
EIPA is there.
Yeah, those are, I would want to just to clarify that RID is for us dinosaurs, because that was our exam. COSLI is in current rendition, and the BEI is in current active.
So you would say RID written and performance exams.
And make sure I'm understanding. So what you're saying is all the A through S are all, these are correct in pathway 2 are from an RID exam?
Correct.
Yeah. No.
Not A.
Nope.
Not A.
Oh, I'm sorry, not A and B.
But also not
Correct.
not W through BIII.
Can you stop it at S?
Yeah, I stopped it.
Is.
Oh, you said S. I'm so sorry. Yes, sorry. So sorry.
Yeah. B and U are the old exams.
Did they have to take the same exam to get all these different certifications?
Nope, they're all different versions of written and performance exams.
And NAD is, we're gonna be.
I know.
NAD is a totally different exam too.
And it was a written and performance exam as well.
I feel getting this one.
Amber, is there a hand up?
This is Amber speaking. Could we simplify it to current and retired cert or certifications from RID, as well as other certifications as approved by the board?
This is Amanda. I think we have to be specific, but we can't say as approved by the board. That's what we're for. Yeah. But I think what you're saying, Amber, is in pathway 2.
Okay.
We're trying to figure out in pathway 1 how to be specific about what we need for the old test so that HLO knows how to evaluate that.
I see.
This is NISA. Why would we have to state it in number 1 if it's already stated in number? Number 1 moving forward, it's the CASLI or the DEI. Good. And if there's something else that pops up of that.
Yeah.
Okay. And if there's something else, then we can always check it later. But then, pathway 2, we should probably just make sure the list that we have is current or was current at one point in time. And then whoever had it or has it, they just get grandfathered in. That way we don't have to add a whole bunch of stuff.
This is Sam. Do you guys have like tests, like, let's say you pass this, or do you just hold certification?
So we get the test, the pass of the tests as well.
Yeah, like a letter that says, yay, you passed. And then here's your numbers, and then you get an actual certificate. That's philosophy that you put on your wall.
This is Amanda. This is not, it's just for the interpreters in the room. I would recommend that you go to RID before it folds and download all of your approved credentials.
Just like social security.
Just go ahead and download it, make a file on your.
Lori, can somebody remind me why in pathway 3, we included the CASLI general knowledge exam? Is that just to have a,
Not yet. If they take the test, the written, but they haven't taken, or the finish the performance. And maybe they add a different, a backup, positive for undergrad. Because right now it's both, hearing and deaf interpreters. The goal is to have them both be able to take the CASLI and to both be able to take the same written test. To be able to apply to both hearing and deaf individuals. Plus, if there's a new, graduating, or people who are taking it, maybe in school or generally whichever, then it could apply to taking the written test. Most of our graduating students from IEPs who pass, they get some experience, they have a letter of recommendation, they could include that also under a
I'm sorry,
provisional
excuse me,
licensure.
interpreter, could you please be copy signing? Thank you.
this is a discussion. Should we add in the DEI as well as the cause lead, just so that language is there?
This is Amanda. The BEI doesn't have a test that's equivalent to that. Their written test is of English proficiency, so I think that's different. I wondered that too, but I think it's different. Not an expert though, so feel free to disagree with that. Yes. Like access, yeah.
Having our ID. How many did you get?
I feel like it's a test that isn't existing, or saying, did you add it yet in the credential?
Because it's for a hypothetical of if the credential is no longer valid. And we have to revert back to our
We
test.
just has to, I think that so you submit proof of having.
Perfect.
We obtain it.
Good. Yep.
Heather has.
And so your intent with pathway 2 is that it's a current or past certificate? Yes.
You guys good with pathway 2 now? Yes. Is there anything you want to change in pathway 3? I'll summarize the changes. Under pathway 1, we have the BEI test of English proficiency and the BEI performance test. So I did want to ask the EIPA level 4 or above scores of it. And then pathway 2, I put submit the proof of having obtained one of the following current or previously obtained credentials.
Sorry, Cindy, would you want to repeat that?
Yeah, so pathway 2, I changed it to submit proof of having obtained one of the following current or previously obtained credentials.
This is Darcy. I wanted to ask the two of you, just to clarify, for pathway 1, it says EIPA 4.0 or above. Could pathway 2, for K-12, should that be included? Or should we leave it blank for an educational? Did you notice that? Because if over here in pathway 3, I'm just thinking, you know, if someone, a recent graduate from an AP or something who doesn't have their EIPA certification yet, but then under 2, because 2 already says you have to be certified or have a certification. So it wasn't really clear to me between these two pathways. Pathway 3 here is the one I have a question about mostly. I'm just thinking of a scenario that would come up if we could clarify that. This is Amanda. So pathway 1 is the IPA 4.0, and then 2 is Ed certification in K-12, and that is the name of it from RID. They have the K-12 certification. That's not related to the EIPA. Okay. understand that, so the minimum score of 4.0 for this K-12 certification, so to me, that's what it's called K-12 certification.
And we need to really are.
Oh, and RID. Oh, yeah, maybe, okay.
We're gonna switch each other.
And so add.
So then, Sammy, I would actually say to add I'm so sorry. We good? I would actually say to add RID to T, U, and V. Because those are RID credentials.
Oh, great. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's. Great, thanks.
That's what they say then.
Just want to make sure that the HLO, whoever's administering this with the HLO, that they are able to identify the appropriate certificates, they know which ones we're referring to. It leaves an easy trail for them to follow.
I'm actually taking from the website and I copied what they had, so, but I'm happy to add RD.
I think it's just clearer.
Because it doesn't, is recognized by the RA.
Oh.
So I did what you guys asked and I made sure every certificate was there. The way they have it.
But I just think that this is, I think it's just easier to, for HLO to find that information. It's connected already.
But you're saying they're separate? You're saying it's recognized by RID, but maybe not.
The educational certificate K through 12, this credential is fully recognized by RID, but the designation is no longer awarded by RID. This designation went into moratorium effective January 1. Okay.
Let's go higher.
It looks. The IPA. Holders of the certification demonstrated the ability to interpret classroom content and disclosure between students who are deaf and hard of hearing and students, teachers, and school staff who are hearing. Certificates demonstrate EIPA level 4 skills using spoken English and at least one of the following visual languages, constructs, or symbols systems at either an elementary or secondary level.
And have to take up the written EIPA.
This is it. Says sign language.
Because that's this.
Credentials off of 2007 to 2016. That's one already was.
It was, and this is Caitlin, it was administered by EIPA, but RID provided the credential for it. So that Casley posts the documents.
Well, doesn't, yeah, no, I'm just looking for RID. And it was Steve, you and me. Okay, the interpreters need 20-minute lunch.
Lori has.
Oh, sorry, Lori.
I'm wondering about pathway 1. We have the EIPA at 4.0 or above, but we don't say anything about the EIPA written. Do we want to add that? Do we require it?
Then yeah.
For pathway 3?
Or 1? Or 1?
It's either EIPA written or degree, correct?
Mm-hmm. Bachelor's degree.
Or the degree.
It's not master's.
Okay.
Okay, right.
But we don't address degrees in here.
Please render,
Darcy, I just think that maybe a better fit for pathway 3. especially for educational interpreters, they can take the CASLI. And the ASLPI, excuse me,
Or Casley, thank you. Casley.
or like it says under A, B, and C. D.
But also,
Well, because, so if they pass the CASLI, and then they also take the written exam. For the EIPA written exam. They have those things plus like 40 hours of educational, whatever, the hour, the minimum hour requirement. That would technically recurrent those interpreters, so we can almost get rid of the license for the educational license.
And you will have to send a bill 950.
So we could probably sort of include that, and have that kind of in our back pocket ready to go.
I'm going back to my original question because that rule is gone. So are we satisfied with the 4.0 on the performance test and no written test? We need to add it.
Or. So there's the AP too first, so we want to pull up the standards. We want to add that into the requirements. Some of those requirements are already there. Okay,
So it would be 4.0 or above and passing the written test, the IPA.
we want to add and or a degree. That's because that's how we currently have it.
We're starting to creep into provisional. These are all we're trying to say the provisional is.
Right.
We're talking about. Okay, we what? Let's
Talk about general. So let's assume, this is Caitlin speaking. Let's assume somebody moves from out of state, but they have experience, so they don't want to go with a provisional license. They want to go straight into a generalist.
Or two or one of them.
If they have their EIPA 4.5, let's say, and they didn't take the written test because they had a degree and that was acceptable.
Degree or written test.
Correct. Yeah.
Tammy, what's your concern about on provisional?
Is that a topic call?
No, not as
Okay,
a
can we
halfway
add
point. So,
We have to, I don't know how you.
Oh, because it's an
Degree's not
examination
in.
section.
Degree is required in a provisional license.
Gotcha.
And we can add it here if you like, we can have a degree and test.
I see that.
Got it. Okay. What?
I don't know.
This is NISA. I think the main concern was pathway one, number D, just changing the verbiage right there, right? To make sure we include written or equivalent degree.
But we can't, because that's an examination section. So that's what she was, that's my understanding. So that's the examination section. So we can add the written exam. But if we want to say or degree, then we have to have another pathway that indicates degree.
So we just.
I don't know that we need
written There,
Yeah.
now,
I would-
Or we can leave it and just assume that if somebody has a 4.0 or above on performance test, that they would have also passed through.
Is that a big assumption?
I don't know. I'm just trying to make it easy.
I know.
Except that, the old one. What you were saying, right, either the written pass or the degree. I think we may have. So 64. We didn't count, regional. 64 of the 4 biggest programs.
Oh,
There are 63 interpreters in the 4 big programs, and 22 of them have under a 4.0.
So under the provisional, when we were in service, we didn't actually say written and, we just left it as task EIPA, which then was both. So you have that.
Did you just say and then it means both?
I believe that's, just I could go back and check, but I believe you guys had me take out, I had written and whatever the other performance. You said, no, take it out, you pass it, then you had to have both. But I have to go back. So, because that's what we have under, we just have, we passed the EIPA, score 3.5. It doesn't designate written.
I think interested in the number score is specifically for the performance, right?
It is, yeah.
They just pass the. I don't know.
And this is the matter because it's, the EIPA written and performance are in whatever order you want to take them. There is no like gate of you have to pass the written before you take the other tests.
2 or 3% of EIP.
35% or 22 people passed at 4.
The other ones haven't passed it at a 3.5.
Between
But
3.5.
Do they at least have a 3.5 for them?
They have 3.5.
Amber has her hand up.
Can everybody hear me?
Kind of, okay, there you go.
Is that better? Okay. I'm gonna say something that is probably very controversial. I don't think D, having EIPA 4.0 in the generalist license is appropriate. I understand that RID has recognized this, level of getting a 4.0. It's been recognized with RID in the past as, if you obtain a 4.0 or higher, submit it to RID and it will qualify you as a nationally certified interpreter and they will give that. But it has been taken away. That's not, and I don't know the history behind that, but personally, I just feel like having the EIPA 4.0 indicating that this is the same level of the CASLI Generalist Performance Exam, I don't feel like it's equivalent. You're being tested on very specific things that pertains to education. And those things are in education. And the things that you get tested on in the Generalist Performance Assessment are not, they're two different things. Honestly, if I had it my way, I would make the educational license a specialty license because education is a specialty. So personally, I don't think that it needs to be in there at all. If you have it, great, but I don't think that it should even be in there. It's not the same thing. I wouldn't expect for any testing regarding medical stuff to be applicable here either. You know what I mean? But I recognize that probably not many people are going to agree with that. So if there was a strong feeling to leave EIPA 4.0 or above in there, I would not make a recommendation to have the written exam supplemented in there anyway, because of everything that we've talked about already. But it's also not required by pretty much any employer to have the EIPA written. So just being in line with that, if this is something, because I know we have like restrictions on how many times that an educational license can be renewed right now. I don't know if we've already talked about that to change it, but as it stands, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought now. It doesn't make sense for an educational interpreter to be given more requirements than what their employer is asking for, if that makes sense. So if I could do it my way, I would take out D altogether. But again, probably not going to be agreed with by the committee. So if that's the case, I would not want to see written exam as a requirement in that if we're going to leave it.
This is the interpreters. We can keep in mind the interpreters do need to take about 15, 20 minutes to eat as well, and some fuel, so. That would be ideal.
Yeah.
Can you write it down?
Thank you.
Ready? Okay, so I think, oh, no. Did you want to add, you want to say EIPA 4.0, EIPA performance exam 4.0 or above, and the written exam? Oh, right. You're welcome.
Hit the ground running.
Okay. This is not.
Yes.
Which part? Oh, yeah, which part are we talking about?
Under pathway 1.
Back on generalist.
Sorry.
Some general.
About the EIPA being included. And written.
No, I guess it. The OEE requirement says degree or EIPA written exam. And so just to maintain that, it seems to include, I think we should include the written under exams because it's an exam as well. And so I think like with like the whole degree thing, I don't know what to do. If that needs a separate pathway, or that could be under the different pathway, number 3 pathway that we already, I think we have an avenue.
True.
I don't think we need to recreate a wheel. Somebody comes in and says, I have this certification and the experience in the degree.
If you were to do a different pathway with for a degree, they would, and all they had to do was have the EIPA written and
The performance and the degree.
performance and a degree. That's actually less than what they need for degree, because they have to have the ASL fluency and the English fluency. So for the general staff, have less.
But the ASL fluency was a 3.5, right?
This one's a 4.0.
No, proficiency in English, I said that wrong. Proficiency in English and English proficiency and.
I thought the provisional was a 3.5 and then here it's a 4.0.
So, A, academic degree. Well, I guess you don't have to have the exam too.
Am I under provisional now?
Never mind.
Okay.
Never mind.
This is Amanda, in regards to having the EIPA in there at all. There are a lot of things under generalists that are not the NIC, including the oral, legal, performing arts that we're accepting because we just said RID in general. So I think the EIPA fits there just as much as anywhere else. And if we no longer have an educational license, once something gets signed, then there needs to be a pathway for educational interpreters to get a generalist, right, so license.
That's what I was gonna say. I'm sorry, Amber, this is Mel. I had my hand up before the lunch break and I forgot what I was gonna say. I was gonna respond to your comment about having the educational K through 12 certificate. In past discussions, we talked about not going through our certificate by certificate under RID and handpicking what we would accept it for you, because that just opened up a bigger can of worms that we could spend time discussing each and every one. And so we just said everything that RID has had, we're gonna keep just to make it standard across the board, no favoritism. This is just what they honored and recognized, we will honor and recognize the grandfather in. And so that was kind of our rationale at that time. For doing that. Yeah.
That's Amanda.
Okay, this is Amber speaking. I appreciate both of your guys' comments. Can we confirm that, Amanda, your comment about, sorry, my headset wasn't fully down. Will the educational license be taken off if 950 passes?
Yes.
Because my
Yes.
understanding, my understanding was that the
Senate-
educational license is not a specialty license and therefore will not be taken out.
Was a specialty license.
This is Christie. It was a specialty, it was removed, and now they would fall under provisional generalist or supervisor
Or in training.
or in training. Right.
Okay.
If-
Okay.
This is Amanda. Oh, sorry, Amber, did you have more?
Yeah, just one more. I wanted to respond to Mel. Sorry. Thank you. And then Mel, I can totally understand where you're coming from as well, as far as, that was something that if we're acknowledging any and all retired RID certifications, that makes perfect sense to me. However, this isn't an RID certification. We're allowing an assessment to be put in there. So if we wanted to put in RID K-12 certification, I'm more for that than I would be for the EIPA, because when you're looking at the other certifications on Pathway 1, it says
Those are tests.
the other tests, right? Those are certifications, but the EIPA is an assessment, right? And the assessment has no requirement to maintain it. There's no membership continuation. There's no CEUs that are required for it, from my understanding. And so it doesn't really make there's maintenance that has to be done with the CASLE's exams in comparison to the EIPA. So for me, it feels like those are two very different things that aren't really necessarily equivalent. But if we're putting in the RIDs K-12 retired to be inclusive of what we were talking about before, Mel, like that makes more sense to me. But having an assessment just plain and simple there, that doesn't seem like it's the same thing.
So this is Amanda. Pathway 1 is all exams or assessments. So the CASLE written, the CASLE performance are exams. They're not the credential. They're not named as the credential in that one. And the EIPA 4.0 performance, and we've added the written in, makes it parallel to the CASLE ones. And so those are all tests. The credentials are in Pathway 2, where we're including RID, interpreter education, K-12. And that's Pathway 2, where the credential is included with everything and their brother. Vacation and Saint, sorry, whatever. So it seems parallel to me because they're tests.
This is Amber. I see what you're saying now. I'm looking at it myself. I can see where you're coming from. Yeah.
This is Caitlin. I would think that as we go into looking for requirements for renewal, we can add in something about continuing education. Like that makes sense to me.
100%.
Because before the whole licensing thing happened, ODE required 12 hours of PD for educational interpreters. So while the EIPA itself doesn't require continuing education, we're just trying to make sure that that would still happen. And we can still do that with our renewal requirements.
This is Christie, and I just want to emphasize, if we remove the EIPA, we're removing a pathway for those educational interpreters who have only taken the EIPA.
And then this is Amanda, and I have a question about kind of a follow-up to what Amber was saying about the educational certificate being removed. Sammy, you made a comment about, because I think we said the specialties are being removed, so we won't have to define those settings. And you were like, maybe. So are we going to have to define settings? And for what purpose? Or is that a later discussion? Like once the signatures happen?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look in a section, you'll see it.
Oh, is there still, we were looking for it over lunch, but okay. All right, we'll look again.
15, 12.
Okay. So apparently there's still settings mentioned in there. Okay.
This is Mel. This is probably, I don't know, might make it worse, I don't know. Amber, I was going into the Oregon legislative session, looking at the amendments to Senate Bill 950, and in some of them, it mentioned removing specialty settings, and it called out legal and medical. It did not call out educational. So I understand why it could be confusing, because in some of the written parts on which draft you pulled up, it called things out, and in another one it didn't. And so I too had that curiosity in the back of my mind of does this mean something? Am I reading into this or not? But having heard from Georgianne earlier, I'm gonna follow what they said. Because that's their wheelhouse.
You want a pathway forward?
Huh?
You guys want a pathway forward?
I think if we're gonna, this is Mel, the educational interpreter committee, I think wants a pathway for the degree.
Do you like that you're kidding?
Yeah.
Or we're gonna force people to take a test, even though they have a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need.
Is there a certain degree, bachelor's, associate?
Is
It
it?
says
It doesn't specify. It's a college, it's a degree. You do not what?
I didn't hear all three of you talking about.
Why not?
It requires a degree in an interpreter-related field, I believe.
Is it?
Definition?
This is Mel,
Doesn't say.
a fully bachelor's or associate's degree from an interpreter education program or in a related educational field. I'm getting
You have to
it.
tell me what related is. We won't know. And trust me, we won't know.
This is
Can
Mel.
we just say, we can do what we did.
Which one?
We're gonna mind melt. It stood for the RID exam. You
Yep.
just have to have a bachelor's degree. It
Yep.
does not call out any field.
Yep.
I feel very comfortable just saying a bachelor's degree
Or associates.
or an associate.
Yep. 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 And be sure that, this is Amanda. I just also want to make sure, because some interpreting programs, and I can't remember if PCC is one of them, are associates of applied sciences versus an associate of arts or a transfer degree. So just associates is sufficient, any kind of associate's degree. I don't care if it's a transfer degree, an arts degree, applied sciences, a science degree, I don't care what it is.
This is Christie.
It's
The
PCC.
previous OAR said hold a bachelor's or associate's degree from an interpreter education program.
You're
And
saying,
you're saying,
I don't care. Because to sit for the national exam, they don't care.
if you pass the test at a 4.0, I guess I don't care either.
It's we're assuming there's an interpreter training component somewhere.
I know, that makes me a little nervous.
But they will also have a 4.0. They will not just have the degree. What is the nervous? What is the nervous?
I think I've seen a lot of freelance interpreters step inside the educational setting and not have enough background. Or the, like, for an IEP meeting, the language that is tied to that. That would be my worry, that someone hasn't had enough opportunity to learn some of those terminology, how to settings, all the things that are taught in an educational interpreter or interpreter program that has some focus on education.
so I need to verify something here. So pathway one is exams. We have passed the EIPA written, and the EIPA performance exam, level 4 or above.
Yep.
Wouldn't that be the educational interpreters? Why do we need a pathway 4?
Let's pause for interpreters, please.
The degree.
Why do they need the
Hold on,
degree with
pause for the
hold on.
interpreters to switch, please.
Thank you.
This is Lori, because right now, the way the OIR.
Talking about generally and provisional.
Still general.
It needs the written test, the written EIP test, or a degree. So we have people right now who have a degree who did not take the written EIPA test.
And we want to be licensed.
So. You just having them have a degree?
No, so degree and passing EIPA,
Performance test.
yes, performance with a 4.0.
You see what I'm getting at here? You can pass the written, are you saying they don't have to pass the written?
Correct.
Just the.
Yes, yeah.
Sandy.
This is Maya. So I'm not familiar with the training that goes into the hours they have to take. Is there like any medical interpretation classes that they have to take, talking about the background? I mean, we're not talking about education licenses, are we? You're just referencing that?
This is Christy. We're trying to recognize that now, assuming that 950 will be taxed, assigned, that the educational specialty license is moved. And so we need a pathway for educational interpreters to continue to be licensed and have the opportunity to advance through those licenses. So if we don't have EIPA on the generalist in our folks that have been provisionally licensed now want to go for the generalist, but they've only taken the EIPA, we would then force them to take another test and or take their passing score potentially and apply it to their generalist. That makes sense?
I would,
Your question was on
I think I was referencing to having the associate's degree, whether we wanted to require that or not require it in transition cert.
It's
Like
like
we're interpreting, yeah.
Starting to kind of pick things. And then you have all these little things and then you're missing all the other little things. So it's like cautionary tale.
Totally open to it being an interpreter.
But Maya, I think you want to probably visit the medical piece.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if they're required to have any background educationally and, okay, just they pass the test and they're good to go. No medical interpretation classes, no preliminary like prerequisite classes or anything like that.
It's going to fall under medical anyway. Medical still has a specialty license.
Well, for the next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
When 950 passes, there will be no specialties. Oh, do you mean the OHA thing?
Yes.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, yeah, sorry.
I just have a question. I'm not familiar with all of the, all of the different tests, but I was just wondering, so like if we have, let's say, like, IPA, and then, the bachelor's in interpreting, but then or bachelor's in anything, and then a specific number of hours, maybe, of experience or training, something like that, for the test, with that.
Maybe.
Have first.
I think, I don't want to weaken the educational interpreter that's already in, that's been there forever. I think we need to keep what they've had. Respect that. If we could maybe like have a bachelor's degree or an associate's.
This is Nissa, because I don't know, so let's clarify. If you take the CASLI, the BEI, the EIPA, do those require degrees? So they require a degree in
CASLI.
CASLI. So if I took a BEI, it wouldn't matter? So then what's the difference with just having an EIPA if you don't need a degree for BEI? And that'll be in there.
This is Amber speaking. It says online that you have to have a high school diploma for the BEI or equivalent.
Point made.
This is Christy. I'm not addressing that comment. I'm having another thought. I'm just realizing also thinking about our very long discussions about alternative pathways for deaf interpreters. So I guess, are we thinking that pathway 3 is the way for deaf interpreters? So if we add the EIPA to the generalist, that is not going to disrupt our pathway for deaf interpreters, correct? Okay.
This is Caitlin responding to Nissa. So currently, you must have an EIPA performance test, and either EIP written test or degree. For my team of 10, only one of us is taking the written, the rest of us all have a degree.
EIPA and CASLE, right?
EIPA alone for education,
Written or
performance.
So a degree, veneer, what kinds and how many and what types, and the performances.
Correct.
At a 4.0 or above that.
So that's the only specialty that requires a degree with it.
It's an option.
Right.
This is for Steve. Wouldn't we just keep then the language that's already in the old OARs? Right? Keep that because it addresses all things. Yeah.
Leave it as is.
This is not, I just understood that we could not keep broad, it has to be specific, right? Is that what you said, Tammy? That we could not say just a bachelor's?
No, you
Any
can-
other, but can you just say like in interpreting or any other? Because I thought you
No,
mentioned.
any other, you just say no.
Just in general.
Oh,
Okay.
And I mean, when you start a licensing program, you usually gotta be broader. And then as you start to license people 5 years, 10 years, then you start narrowing it more as the profession becomes more professional, more licensees, more opportunity. So it's not uncommon to start broader and then sink it down.
And then Sammy, I just want to make sure we have associates and bachelors, correct?
I have one. And with no type, with no sign language interpreter, just one of them. If they have a master's degree.
Could have a bachelor's.
Or
Sure about that?
associates and above.
I wouldn't be.
Yeah, associates are above.
Maybe
Associate or-
degree.
Say that again?
Hold on. Yeah, we had this conversation. Just say degree. So everything's included. I remember that conversation. Okay, let me run through this one more time. So how do we go from the top? So pathway one, examinations, we have the pathway, three parts. The college exam and the generalist performance exam, NIC, or the generalist performance exam, CBI. Or you can do the EI test of English proficiency and the EI performance test. Or you could do the EIPA written exam and the EIPA performance exam level 4 or above. That takes care of everything. Okay. Pathway 2, just adding, submit proof of having obtained one of the following current or previously obtained credentials. This is on the fly, so this could change. And then I added RID in front of education certificate, specialist certificate, legal, oral, transliteration certificate. And then added pathway 4, academic degree, and examination, submit proof of all following, having an educational degree. From,
Pathway 4, or did you say 3?
4. Oh, I didn't change pathway 3, so I didn't even talk about it. Change, sorry.
Okay.
I just took from what was in provisional, I didn't even run this by you, have an educational degree from an accredited college or university in the United States. That's what we use in provisional. And proof of passing the EIPA performance exam level 4.0.
and yeah.
the basic concept.
Can I just mention something that, just going to what, Krista was mentioning, something that we have noticed. Sometimes like in the spoken language in the medical field, there are people that are able to go through some classes, and be a qualified interpreter, but they do not have any experience in the field. So we are seeing a lot of that happening. I mean, they do have the qualifications because they were able to pass the test, they were able to certain things, but they do not have experience. So just kind of moving with what you were mentioning. So I was just wondering if it says if we could add something in, if it's not a degree in the medical field, that they should have X amount of interpreting hours. I don't know, that's something that. 3 though, honestly, right? Well, that's for 4. I was just saying but that way, that if someone has a degree, I have a degree in English, and then I go on to the performance, I have no idea how to interpret, in that specific field. So I'm just saying. Just to kind of go with what you were mentioning, it's something that we are seeing, so let's just go and call it out.
This is Amanda. So you're saying that they are able to pass the performance tests, but they don't have any practical experience?
Yes.
And then what is that looking like in the field? What are the problems that are happening?
Yeah, so what happens is we are getting, we're getting complaints from providers or staff members or patients that they're not following what they're supposed to, they're not interpreting everything. There's a lot of things that are happening. Another thing is they might have knowledge of the things that they were tested on, but not everything. So that's another area where having a little bit more experience on the field might be beneficial for the consumer.
Lori, so for educational interpreters, what that typically looks like is having a community or a contracted agency send an interpreter for an educational setting. They will stand and do their thing in front of the room, and then when that kid needs some tutoring later on that material, they refuse to do it.
Yeah. Which feels, this is Amanda, which feels like that doesn't belong in the generalist, that would have belonged in a specialty. Yeah. Right, like you need to have so many hours in education, you need to have so many hours in medical training, you need to have so many hours in, really, it would have belonged in one of those specialty areas.
Trying to think. I'll have more questions at the next meeting. Okay, yeah.
First, Darcy. I'm thinking if under pathway 4, we have a proof of written EIPA exam plus some experience under a mentor or supervisor or some kind of specific hours without help to support that. If, for example, I'm just saying this, if it's like you here, we're not working as an educational interpreter, but wanted to, you were considering every once in a while doing that setting. Not full time, but every once in a while, if the opportunity came up, you would be in that setting. So would that be supportive? Would that be a good structure for that?
This is Lori, and Christy and I might see differently on this, but my opinion on that is I would much rather have interpreters who I can find and hire who don't have experience as an educational interpreter and teach them than to not have those interpreters available at all because they don't have the license.
Yes, so do we add it in a stipulation when they go to renew?
Yes.
So that way we cover
Absolutely.
the next time, but we're not taking them out.
Yes, I would say.
Interpreters are going to take a quick moment to switch.
This is Caitlin speaking. I think it would be hard to require specific field training. If I don't want to do legal, I'm not going to do training. What's the point? if an agency tries to put me in a legal city and I'm gonna say, hey, no, I'm not qualified, I should not be here. So we have to kind of depend on people's ethics, which is hard, and that sucks. But I don't think we can force everybody to be knowledgeable in every single specialty. So sometimes it's the luck of the draw, sometimes it's people's opinion of themselves, being like, no, I can handle education, that's fine, and then being thrown for a loop when they have to tutor. But I don't know how we can, without the specialty licenses, I don't know how we can require those things.
This is Heather. Another thing to think about is that your rules relate to licensure for specific type of license set by statute. That doesn't mean that in whatever field or employment you're doing, that you can't set additional contract requirements or expectations in your own field. So if you, as in education, feel that they need a certain amount of experience, then you could figure out how to do that within your entity. If you in medical feel like they need a certain amount of experience or knowledge, then you could set that up separate from.
This is Amanda, because this is generalist. I mean, this is generalist. I don't think I can add things like that. Amber, is your hand up for realties? Okay. Go ahead. I wasn't sure if it was just still up or if it was up again.
No, that's fine. This is Amber speaking. I'm reviewing the language of Senate Bill 950, and it does, still say may establish additional specialty licenses for sign language interpreters that the board determines necessary. So maybe we can just put in a recommendation to the board to maintain the educational license as it stands and just use all of the same framework that we've been using, because I'm hearing a lot of concerns about melding them all into the same pot. My personal concern is seeing a educational interpreter take jobs at like an all-day VR conference that they are not qualified to be taking, but they have the general license because of all of these extra things that we've made it accessible to them. So now they're able to put themselves in a position where hopefully, that they're following those ethics we talked about, but maybe they don't know, So I just get concerned because we're putting generalists as like, this standard general thing, but I don't know. I have a lot of concerns about that. So I would hope that we can just put in a recommendation to the board to maintain the educational specialty license separately and be able to house educational interpreters in that way.
This is Lori. I would support that. And I would also like to offer up a challenge to anyone who'd like to take all of the ASL assessments and do a little crosswalk and let's see how they compare. Because I also suspect that there are some people with the 3.5 EIPA who could do really well in a lot of general.
Absolutely.
And also some people with a 4.5 who would probably really suck at being educational interpreters. Right.
This is Amber. That's exactly my point. That's 100% my point. Because it's separate. It's not the same. I wouldn't expect a freelance interpreter like Christy had mentioned to come in and know everything about the terminology being used in an an IEP meeting. And in the flip side, somebody who hasn't been freelancing and going to all these different settings is maybe not, and VR is I'm using that as a very special example, but there's a lot of in-group information. And so there's prep work involved and everything, obviously. So that's exactly my point, Larry. You hit it right on the nail.
This is Caitlin speaking. I would also like to point out in rural areas that EIPA is the most accessible option usually. And rural interpreters do K-12 and they do medical and they do everything because that's all that they have. And some of them definitely not qualified. Some of them plenty qualified. It just depends on the person. And that's the important thing about our field is that it's so individualized and there's no one performance assessment that can capture all of that. in every setting.
You could make the same case for teachers, right? They all take the same licensure test and some of them are really bad.
Doctors, lawyers,
And some are
all of
great.
them. Yep.
So you can find that in any career.
Yep.
Darcy?
Don't open a can of worms, another can.
So you have the educational interpreters. Suppose they have the general educational interpreting at a 4.0, suppose, or even like the 3.5. They could go ahead and take the ASL, the CASLI, and get their license for their general interpreting out in the community. So now they have both. I don't know, maybe that would help like bolster some of that and maybe we can add other stuff later if we need to, but kind of keeping them separate might be better. Oh, good.
Wondering how long it takes to get CAPS like
Scored back.
they need it about 3 months. Shorter than 9 months.
Mhm.
It's like a year plus.
Up to 3 months.
This is Amanda. I'm not opposed to what I'm about to say, but I also just want to say that, so Darcy, if we're gonna follow that an educational interpreter has to get the RAD test in order to work in the community, then a community interpreter would need to get the EIPA in order to work in education. And like I said, I'm not opposed to that, but now we're saying there should be a separate license for education, right? Because because it's a specialty or whatever, right? So this is no longer a generalist, and we would have to say that a generalist cannot work in education because they actually don't have the credentials to do it. So that's the can
Which
we're
I don't
opening.
like.
Right.
I just
know,
want to say
right?
that now, because if we need a sub and we have to call
I
an
know.
agency, we're not gonna get
I
an
know.
education.
I just don't think we're nuanced enough to be able to say these things, right? Like, these tests test something. You have proven that you can do something at a minimum standard. And then your practice and your supervision and your collegial conversations about ethics. And when you make mistakes and you take a job that you shouldn't take and you learn on the job and you do prep and you do, like, it's a practice profession. We practice and figure things out. So this is just setting a minimum standard, and there are multiple ways to show a minimum standard. Some of them are in education, some of them are in generalists. Technically speaking, if we're gonna follow this logic, if I take the NIC test, I should never work with children or anyone over 50. Because the people on that test are between 20 and 50. So at some point, we have to just accept these are minimum standards. We are a practice profession, and we work it out as we go.
This is Chrissy. I just want to say, even though I made the comment about freelancers coming in or whomever and not having the skills, I do as an agency provide peer mentors.
Yes,
we
absolutely.
coaching,
Yep.
professional development, so
Yes.
Yep.
And now we can go with what Heather said, the field.
This is Caitlin. The other thing is that even before 950, pretend 950 never happened. We still required educational interpreters to have a limit of 5 years before they become generalists.
Yep.
Easiest way to do that for them is EIPA.
Calling also if and when we can work on the complaint process.
Yep.
And making that robust, because our beginning conversations a year ago were about like including everybody, as many people as we can, testing a broad test, being inclusive, having a strong system in place so that if there's complaints, we can manage those, and having more of a restorative justice, additional training, like not a punitive, but a restorative practice in how we keep interpreters in the field. Second, as a 30-year practicing interpreter, sure, I started as a generalist, but as you know more and do better, you do better. And I picked a lane. I was a legal interpreter, right? So all of my CEUs are around legal interpreting. I said, practice profession and I'm gonna practice in the area that I'm the most effective in. Educational interpreters, same difference. There's CEs and training schools in the education. Medical, people tend towards, because we know the more we're in the field that I can't be good at everything. If I can be really good at it, more narrow.
And we want to be good.
And I like it too.
Yeah.
It's the tendency. We done with generalists?
It has taken us 3 years and we made it through provisional.
1 year.
generalist. 1 year and we made it through 2. I was trying some 2 things. Thank you for correcting.
Hard per minute.
You guys have been here for 50 years.
I'm proud of yourself. You've come a long way. Long ride. Hard times. Okay. So. Advisory, so what I did is I gave you what's already in the rule, because I didn't know any better. So, and what it says is basically what the generalist says now, not the new one, now with minimum of 3 years qualifying experience. Now, there's no definition around qualifying experience. I don't know if you want to name, I don't know, that's some things that you need to banter around.
This is Amanda. Can you give us some examples of other people? Because other professions, I mean, like what would qualifying experience be? Like hours of service
So like
or?
polysomnography, they have sleep technicians.
Sleep technician.
How do I get the rules up here? They have patient interaction, professional behavior, patient assessment, polysomnography theory, performing polysomnography preparation setup, so things like that. But
How
I
do
don't
you
know how-
prove that? What do they show you?
They have to. I think that they have to show, have to have sign off on 30 sleep studies.
Yeah, we don't have.
But they've got a very, and that's the only board that I could think of that I have that has work experience. And has more. Yeah.
This is Amanda. Is it generally like sign off from somebody who verifies you did a thing?
Supervisor.
You did a thing of some sort?
Well, fine. So let's see what the statute says. Oh.
Because I'm thinking like we show like our taxes, you know what I mean? Like to show that we worked a certain number of hours, we've been paid to do work. For court, we track court work hours, and I think we can show pay stubs, and then if they haven't tracked it themselves, get a letter of proof. But I don't know, like freelancers, that'd be ridiculous. They'd have to have letters from 47 people.
You see your earnings for that.
It's like a caution sheet.
Do that.
Yeah, that would be insane. I get it though.
What we do with
Absolutely.
tattooing professionals come in.
Oh, sure, that would be
and
similar
say,
to that,
I've been a
yeah.
tattooist
Yeah.
in New Mexico and
Yeah.
I've been there 5 years. Here's 6 months of tax returns.
Okay.
Well, we require 5 years. of tax returns.
Yeah.
I guess 1099s would work too. Yeah, it says.
If we can take this opportunity to switch interpreters.
Thank you. Yeah, it says remote licensing office may issue a supervisory license. A language interpreter license to an applicant who has at least 3 years of qualifying experience as determined by the board. So it's not necessarily supervising experience, it's qualifying experience. And I believe how we wrote the original rules, if you had the credential for 3 years, that.
Yeah, that's right.
Think that's possible, we could do that. Okay.
would think, yeah, this is Amanda, I would think so, because I also don't want it to be like a minimum number of hours, because it's so, it so depends.
Yeah, because then you start going 40 hours a week,
Yeah.
and they're like, what, they got.
That's not too practical. Yeah, if you've held the credential for 3 years. Yeah.
Well,
Are we the only ones paying attention? We were the only ones talking. This is so loud inside my head.
Darcy. For number 4. It says evidence of compliance with the NAD, RID Code of Ethics, Code of Conduct. And then the following wording. How would we know that they are in compliance? Who is the one that evaluates, or who at HLO will monitor to ensure compliance? Because I've personally seen some interpreters that are not in compliance, but there's no formal supervision of that aspect. So it's a bit odd to have it there in the rules without that other part of it. This is Caitlin speaking. It says attestation. Attestation would satisfy that requirement, which means that the individual is swearing that they do comply with code of conduct. So consequences would come from a consumer complaint saying the interpreter did not comply with such and such of code of conduct. So you are correct that that makes sense. So does that mean, Darcy says, does that mean that HLO would need to contact the RID to ask if the RID has received any complaints regarding this interpreter, and that would see if they have been compliant? It's a challenge to know if they've been compliant. Caitlin says, well, they might have to. Well, the consumer can complain. It would have to be an organ consumer. And they would have, and Mel says they would have to complain to the HLO specifically.
Correct. A mentor could be a supervisor. Or here. There are lots of different people who could.
This is Bob. So with that being said, if they're attesting to it, you're able to audit. So we may find that something's fishy here, they've been issued a license, but then we get a complaint, we can audit and say, hey, please provide us the documentation from the national or whatever organization they're with, that they're in compliance. And if they have it, if they're still, we still have the regulatory process to go through to investigate further, to whether there's a violation.
This is Mel. I don't have, this comment isn't about what Bob's comment. This isn't about Bob's comment, sorry. Looking at the supervisory license now and knowing SB 950 is coming, is out there, should we add little b, that little b, training license and in training license both? Or maybe just add in parentheses, just pencil it in maybe, or put a little something in there. Then my other thought is, Darcy, would you mind repeating that for me? What was that? Right now, a supervisory license holder can supervise someone in training. In the future, with this new license that might come for students, the in training license, supervisor might be able to supervise those as well. So that was my thought on the B. Now in the renewal timeframe or timeline, it's going to be annually or whatever SB 950 has come up with. But we can have something in there, those who have held the organ licensure for one time, we have to hold it for one time period before someone can even apply for the supervisory. That way we guarantee the individual has held the license for some period of time, they gain some experience. We're not having someone come out of the blue and become supervisory in the field without actually being here for a little while. So I think it might be an idea to add something in there about a time period or experience requirement. This is Amanda. Question for Mel about that. Just a little hypothetical. So we were talking about, the in-training license, right? The in-training license that might be. Whoever is individual with the person who has the in-training license would be their supervisor, would have to be supervisory. Is that what you're saying? Or could that individual be a general license holder? The in-training person, because it does say the person in training needs to be a company, but it doesn't say by who or what license the person in company would have to hold. Yes, it's about the in-training. Maybe we can put a limit on the number or the number of we'll have hearing supervisors and then maybe a limited number of deaf supervisors. So that way those new interpreters or interpreting students would be able to have the support from deaf professionals as well. Even though there's not a lot of them, and those deaf interpreters would not have supervisory license, so might not have supervisory license. So something to be aware of, something to keep in mind, so we're not limiting voices to deaf.
It might be helpful to deal with supervisory just as it's written right now. And to wait to then identify and add in anything if 950 is signed. Because that way you kind of limit what you're dealing with and looking at instead of thinking about all the hypotheticals that might be and having a lot of wondering about what is the impact of your things fall. If you just look at what you have right now, and then if 950 is signed into law, then you can build onto that, and that might help with some of those questions.
This is Amanda. I think it's relating to Darcy, your comment about Mel's comment. If a person must be a generalist license holder before they can apply for supervisory, it makes sense, but it seems like it is limiting, it's creating more limits than a training wheels kind of scenario where we're trying to be as broad as possible. We can wait for situations to occur, so for us to make rules, but I can understand having someone needing to have an organ license before applying for a supervisory license. This is Mel, your comment, Darcy, got things going there. Okay, so let's find. Okay, big picture, macro map. There's a new interpreter that perhaps went to an ITP, but there were some gaps in their training and were brought quite up to speed. We are noticing that new graduates are receiving mentoring from other new graduates now. COVID had, for whatever reason, whatever else. So there is that. It would be nice to have someone with more experience to pass on, providing the mentoring and the additional training. One of the big missing parts is connection with the deaf community as well. So how to get exposure to the deaf community. So maybe using that supervisory situation for those interpreters that are in training to be able to have a deaf mentor, a deaf supervisor, some more deaf exposure. It might be a way for us to be able to bring in more deaf supervision into the interpreter growth and training. So maybe not focusing just on an individual who has a lot of experience or a lot of certification being a supervisor, a hearing person, when they haven't, without their experience as well. This is Darcy. Well, there's a lot of new, maybe looking for graduates who have just graduated in the last 2 or 3 years, maybe not using them as supervisory, maybe they have to wait till they're 4 or 5 years into the field. Things have changed after COVID. Definitely things have changed. The dynamics have changed in the field. The contact within the deaf community is much less, and the interpreting community contact with the deaf is non-existent. This is Mel. We just don't have an interpreter that could be a deaf person. It doesn't have to be an interpreter. Maybe someone who is a deaf professional, someone who's a teacher. This is Amanda. The qualification is experience. It doesn't say interpreting. The states have a minimum of 3 years qualifying experience, so we can define what qualifying experience would be.
I'm gonna pause for the person switch.
Okay.
This is Lori. Did we establish whether generalists can supervise a or training?
This is Caitlin. Currently, generalists can supervise provisional license holders. That's how we have it until 20, you're right, 30? I think that's. Until 2030, generalists can also be supervisors.
I'm just thinking big picture, because as it stands right now, I would have no one who qualifies with a supervisory license. So that means I can't take in new interns or anybody.
I think that was the point, is to allow generalists to do it until 2030.
This is Christie, so we would still need to add, to Mel's point, we would need to add in training. It says provisional, but it doesn't say training.
Not yet, because it's not real.
Hypothetically, when it
100%.
becomes real, it could happen.
This is Amanda. I would also hope we would add that to generalist. I hope that a generalist would also be with an intern.
Yes.
Again. We're talking about deaf. Wanting to have, deaf people involved, so we're thinking about, knowing and understanding interpreters in the future, not as an interpreter only, but, we just can't do this with the supervisor requirement the way it is with the licensure. Can we add on?
Sorry.
This is Amanda, but the law says it has to have a minimum of 3 years of qualifying experience. So what is that? We can't make it up. Or we can't have different definitions. We can say someone who has cultural and linguistic competency to provide blah, blah, blah. But there's no definition to qualifying experience. So we could add something.
It's not here.
The blue. Yes. This is Caitlin. I believe right now, supervisory license is only for interpreters, is that correct? Which means we could add something about a deaf professional or whatever who could be in that role, but we can't add, but they can't have a supervisory license themselves, is that correct?
This is Amanda, and I would like to ask Heather or Bob the interpretation of this, because under the supervisory license, 1A, it says may provide sign language interpreting services. It doesn't say you have to. So could you be a non-interpreter and get a supervisory license so that you can provide supervision, but not provide interpreting services?
Where are you looking at the statute?
I have no idea. 816-025-0000, maybe? It's under 1 and little a.
Wait, could we probably move on?
So to your point, so you look 1A, no, 1B?
Oh, we're gonna.
Yeah, 1A, you're looking at 1A. So all of these
And then under the
powers that are gonna be required for interpreters, right? It doesn't say, in the general one, it says just the 1A may have. As opposed to this huge list of.
But all of these look like they apply to interpreters,
Doesn't
right?
say or.
So
So what if we're, depending on where you're looking at, they actually don't agree with each other.
yeah, Heather gets to talk. She's a lawyer.
So we're looking at the current rule.
Yeah.
You're asking about how May operates in section 1.
Yes.
So section 1, these are all the things that a supervisory licensee would do. They can provide sign language services. They can supervise. They don't have to. It's not a mandate that they have to supervise.
Do they have to interpret?
No.
Okay.
Even though you hold a license, you don't have to interpret.
Questions I've ever heard.
But
I know, because you
could-
weren't here, you missed the whole process. Same when we went somewhere crazy.
So you could supervise as long as you hold a license.
Okay.
So if you are an individual who has the qualifications to get that license, and in your nature, you prefer not to provide interpretation services, but you prefer to supervise, then you can do that.
This is Amanda, but what I think I hear you saying is that I still have to be able to provide interpreting services, even if I choose not to.
You have to meet the qualifications of the license.
This just tells you who you are. When you have a supervisor license, this is who you are and what you can do, and what you have to do. Once you have it.
Doesn't mandate that you provide interpretation services or that you provide supervision services.
Like actively.
Yeah. No, I just think the
Hold it.
loophole just closed.
Yeah.
The loophole I was looking for closed.
And that's what I was gonna say.
Exactly. I know that's exactly what you're gonna say about this. It was like I was hearing your voice. Yeah.
Can we add under supervisory license application, number 5, and move it? It says, where here, unit group. It's all A says certification. Credentials. So we could add or testing. Oh, it's there. And then for the third one, we could add another option for deaf professionals. Okay, the devil's advocate here. So you've got, interpreters set, you've got providing support for hearing interpreters, feedback. And what if they don't want to get their supervisory license, but they're willing to provide feedback? So I'm curious about that. What is that gonna look like? Well, because it's not required right now.
FTL.
They don't all have it. Be providing supervisory, and then they could take something else maybe. Yeah, again, like the county tornado.
This is Amanda. I just feel like we need to fill Sammy in on what we're trying to do. No, but what we're trying to do is say that there are people we would want to be able to serve as supervisors who would not be interpreters. So like deaf teachers of ASL who are deaf professionals in the field who might be able to give insight and supervision and that sort of thing. And we thought we had found a loophole in the supervisor one. But even if we add what Mel just said, the reality is still they have to be able to provide interpreting services, even if they choose not to.
Well, they're gonna have to show proficiency by having a credential or passing a test. Well, now what the definitions say is Supervisor, supervisor means advisor, coach, instructor, mentor. So.
Doesn't stand for murder.
No. So whatever the supervisors use.
But if you have to be able to, it's literally. Yeah, I always get confused what's in statute, what's.
Caitlin has.
Oh, wait, so I'm not interrupting. Okay, that's happening.
Only under the supervision of a licensed supervisor. So the license, they have to meet. I'm assuming he's gonna show what they do.
This is Caitlin, can we, since what we have currently for the application requirements for supervisory, that was essentially a copy and paste in the general list, can we just copy and paste it again? Because then,
Yeah, updated?
yes, yeah, so that if a deaf person wanted to take CASLI and pass that and then mentor, they could.
Oh,
But
see
I
what
think
you're saying.
because this license is for sign language interpreter supervisory license, I think that we can't force deaf people who want to be mentors to also get a license. Yeah, yeah. I think it should absolutely count for mentoring or feedback or supervision time. I think it absolutely should count, but I don't think exactly, yeah.
And this is NIFA, that would also potentially solve future crises if RID goes away, because that's one of the things that is required. So if we copy and paste from generalist, it's that.
Not a like complete.
I don't think we put pathway 3, that's what I was thinking. That's just me.
And all the pathways will need 3 years experience.
Right, yes, correct, yeah.
And 3 years is statutory.
I have a clarifying question. So does that mean that, that the only difference between the generalist and the supervisor will be the 3 years of experience and everything else will continue the same, all the requirements? Just clarifying.
I think that's currently what we're saying. This is Amanda, but I'm wondering if they're going to be supervising, shouldn't they have some sort of training around supervision?
Maybe leader.
Or would that be renewal? That we would require something?
You can add additional.
Because I think we all know that being an interpreter and being a mentor of interpreting are different things.
But we also know they're
That's not true.
Any
Yeah.
other requirement established by the board. So if you want to put some kind of leadership, supervisory, mentor skills, you can have that.
There are several trainings. The problem is I also, so that was kind of a key thing. So I could quit the board. I could quit the rest.
I'm sorry, this is the interpreter. I'm having a difficult time hearing you down there.
Sorry.
Can you say it one more
I
time?
was saying there are several trainings available for mentors and coaches. Problem being I offer some of those, and so then it's kind of a icky for me being on the rack, but so I could quit, is what I said.
This is Christine, how about the press, 1:31 PM, governor signed, then
We can talk about it.
I have radar. Side knowledge from that.
This is Amber. Did I just hear that right?
Yep.
Yeah, signed by the governor.
signed.
So it's official now?
It is.
Correct.
Okay.
We're gonna take a moment to.
And when does it start? When does it go into effect, the law?
January 1st, operative January 1st. Yeah.
Effective sign first day after signing.
Dawning over this policy for us.
Talk about not enough time.
We on break or?
Let's say yes.
Not sure what's going on over there.
Oh, yeah, we were chatting in, yeah. I don't know, are we on break? No, okay.
And then.
We were just talking about how, like, it feels a little bit like our balloon got popped, but at the same time, no, because we've been doing good work, but now we can actually add the training to this, since it got signed 30 seconds ago.
This is Nessa. I would like to point out something. If we're gonna copy and paste the stuff from generalist into supervisory, if you look at pathway 3 for generalist, it says a consumer. So that kind of points out one consumer recommendation. I think if you're gonna be a supervisory, maybe several consumers.
Which pathway are you in? 3?
Sorry, 3
No, you're good.
of generalist.
Oh,
I mean, I personally would want several deaf people's experience evaluating me, not just one.
This is Caitlin. I think part of that was to acknowledge the fact that rural interpreters maybe have one person that they interpret
Right,
for.
and that would be great for generalists. I'm talking about
Oh,
supervisors.
right, because generalist doesn't have limits anymore, does it? Renewal?
oh, yeah, you're right.
Right.
I don't know that.
Fantastic,
Right,
then yes,
but I was
yes.
thinking for supervisory, we want at least a little bit more.
Yeah, totally agree. Yep.
Because that would be a good pathway for deaf interpreters. But also it would hold them accountable. That was just one thing.
Increased to 3?
3 or 5?
3. 3 feels correct.
Amanda, so one of the things we have at Western, for people applying to go into our master's program in the teaching track is we say demonstrated experience with mentorship or demonstrated experience in mentor training or something like that. That feels a little too vague for you all maybe, but how can we be broad and also it be evaluatable? And I feel like I need your guys' help for that, because we want them to have something.
Maybe like.
But I don't know what it is yet. I mean, like, I don't. Serving as a mentor?
Darcy, I think it's also related to, your comment about keeping things general, but at the same time, having some consumers. So working as raters. So, so they can evaluate interpreter skills or students. And we can, having them in our interpreting program too, is like having deaf people, giving some of that feedback and supporting the training process, including, good feedback to the interpreters. So they, focus on the English with ASL, providing specific feedback. So I mean, I'm sure, we're between and whatnot, but so the evaluator can be more general. So having deaf people who use interpreters who have that experience, people who are has feedback. Or, so you put the little or in there and just keeping it more general.
This is Nessa. Would that maybe fall under what I just said about consumers, maybe upping the number a little bit more? Because then you kind of hit all that with at least evaluations and raters.
So which number?
We said 3, like recommendations from deaf users, maybe you should be at like 5 or 10.
5 or 10 what?
Like, written recommendations from people. That was too bad.
This is Lori, and I feel like, okay, so you're talking about 10 like letters, recommendations? Oh, that's too much. I feel like
our deaf population in Oregon is not so great that doing this is gonna put a huge burden on a very limited resource.
Yeah, is that people write that many letters? No.
I mean, not even, I'm not even specifically talking about the 10 letters, I'm talking about like any mandated, anything that involves deaf clients, deaf consumers. I feel like we're throwing mandatory work out there that the deaf population is gonna have to absorb without any kind of pay, and that's not fair.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with asking the deaf community to write letters. Because there's gonna be tons of interpreters.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, there are gonna be tons of requests from lots of different interpreters in the community. And that's, yeah.
I also feel like interpreters who are good interpreters and people who want to be.
People who are willing to provide, like 1 or 2 letters, that's fine, but you've got all these interpreters out there asking the same thing, so that's too much.
People who want to be supervisors are gonna intuitively go out and seek out deaf events and learn more and be around the population. I'm leery about requiring more and more from people when our objective is to try and get more people into the interpreting world, not to make it harder. We want them to be competent, but I'm hopeful that they will build that on their own to some extent.
No, I totally understand your perspective on that, and don't need to come back to the conversation kind of late, but I guess my comment does right a bit what you were saying. My feeling, my opinion, I have 30 years of experience as an interpreter, and I have watched our profession change over the years. In the beginning, it was more closely related to the deaf community. There's a lot of interaction there. Deaf people would say, okay, they'd identify certain people as, oh, you might be a good interpreter, and bolster them into the profession. Money became involved, and it became more like a business. And now we're shifting more like educational requirements became a thing. Started requiring the education, requiring certification, and all of that, interpreters are paying a lot to become interpreters, which is great, we want that. And then it's now that the profession has shifted so far away from the deaf community. I just feel like it's just what I've noticed. So especially like the new interpreters that are coming to the field, like they're just looking over the shoulder, right? It's like there's no deaf community involvement. So I'm just trying to think, what other options, what other ways do we have to get back to the deaf community? So we're trying to, we've seen the impact of that not being there anymore.
Might not be measurable or tangible, but we need something there.
Yeah, it would be nice to include more of a general deaf. Like how many deaf people would really be applying for a supervisory thing? Maybe 1 or 2. It's not gonna be very many. So what do we want from the deaf community? What are we needing from them? Free gifts of their time. So now you've got new interpreters looking all over the place. Where are the deaf people? Where's the deaf community? And it's just not there. Maybe we might have a list. So again, there's just not that many deaf people out there.
The deaf field, why should I be applying for this role? Who is asking for me to do this?
There's gotta be a way to get back to the deaf community. Take notes of dinner, do some sort of like reciprocity. As opposed to just taking advantage of the deaf community for the sake of, hearing interpreter.
The deaf community experience, they often have seen hearing people come into the community for their own benefit, and then as soon as their benefit is done, they leave. To the deaf community's detriment, that's what the deaf community is weighing on.
Well, I've got a question for you, Sammy. Are the boards paying, or who's paying for the work?
Are other boards, if there are other boards with their supervisory roles paid for that work?
Yeah. Cancel this.
Me, I think my experience is we would pay counseling supervisors, we pay them for their time, for their supervision. This doesn't say anything about that, but.
It is in practice.
My expectation would be that supervisors are paid. How? I don't know. Through the individual, through an agency, through the school district or whatever, but supervisors can't, we will lose supervisors if they have to do it for free. They can't afford to do that for free, or all of the people in Oregon.
This is Nessa. And that was what I was trying to say, but what I was trying to get out there was, if you're gonna become a supervisor, you wanna be held accountable, because, so I think some professional evals from the deaf community, you paying them obviously for their time, but getting their feedback, because they're the ones who suffer if you are not good. So like, we first said 3, but I'm wondering, is that enough? Because you could get 3 biased people. And that's easy.
Yeah.
That's where I'm a little worried. If we want to have recommendations, pathways, maybe, 3 deaf consumers, 3 peers, I don't know.
This is Christy. I think if we look at other, thinking education, when you apply for various jobs, typically it's 3 references.
Right.
So I think that's a reasonable number. I also think we need to remember that it could be 3 biased, it could be 3 friends, they can have a side deal, but there is going to be a complaint process on the other.
That's huge.
So we don't want to burden
Entry. Right?
entry,
Like
for any job.
entry level, but we're talking about. So supervisor, we typically look out.
Correct, but again, I think that asking 10 people to write you letters is extremely too much.
Yeah.
It's a burden, as Lori
Well, it's
said.
not the experience.
Right.
And we're doing a lot of other things, and what, and.
This is Amanda. I also just want to say, being a good interpreter does not make you a good mentor. So having 3 consumers who are like, I love her, and all the mentees hate you, could also happen, right? So, just saying.
So is it possible to do like or something like a letter saying, okay, so like these are the things that I am looking for, and then just instead of having all the customers write a letter, they just have, they keep it marked and then signed, yes. Yeah. Like what are the things that you're looking for? I'm just wondering if that's
not a thing.
possible.
Okay.
That would not be something that we would normally do, because that could be, I mean, you could give them a guide in the rule, like your letter must include blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That, and then from that, we could create something, but.
I think you're describing like a reference form.
Yeah,
Right.
something like that, because as you were, was mentioned, yes, it was mentioned, like it might be too much for consumers, or the customers to write letters, so it might be something easier to get that information. Like a client satisfactory.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I like that.
Yeah, I would, yeah.
It's time to switch interpreters. Thank you. Amber has her hand up. Amber has her hand up.
Yes, thank you. Okay, this is Amber speaking. Just a couple of comments. I think we're tapping into something that is also a much bigger problem that we've continuously acknowledged in our field, and that is the lack of mentorship and support for our newer interpreters in the field. I don't know if this is possible. Maybe we can make a whole nother committee just to have like some sort of like supervisory, or not supervisory, but more just a mentorship program in some capacity. I don't know what that would look like, but that seems like a whole other conversation that we could totally get into. There was comments about, like supervisor interpreters being paid. Maybe they can have a lower cost on their licenses if they're actively participating in mentorship, because we talked about how not all supervisory licensed interpreters are going to be supervising interpreters. It's a may, not a must. So if you're actively participating in mentorship, maybe there's a reduced cost behind it, which can be an incentive and kind of helps alleviate some of the time that kind of needs to be paid for as a supervisor, but in a roundabout kind of way. Um, I love the idea of having a deaf supervisor. I think that's a great idea. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say that many deaf people aren't very aware of the full length of what it is that we do. I think that having deaf perspective on what we do is vital and absolutely integral to our practice. But not everybody is going to be proficient in what it means to be a professional interpreter. And then on the other topic of, mentors aren't interpreters aren't necessarily mentors. I know I've been at the purview of not having enough resources and mentorship capacities in the past and needing more. And so while we are trying to design what that's going to look like, can we in turn allow there to be a grace period for experienced interpreters to take on a program, like another committee, some sort of, you know, educational opportunities to help them learn and help us learn. I think that because there's such a gap between being an interpreter and learning how to be an interpreter and then becoming a mentor, um, how does that work? How do we make that happen? Can we encourage more? And like that's a very big question, and I get that. But if there's potential for there to be grace as we continue to train interpreters in their ability to become mentors. I don't know. Amanda?
This is Amanda, two things. One, just on what you just said. I think that there's also an element of supply and demand. So because mentorship has not been largely organized in any meaningful way in our fields, there hasn't been training for mentors, and there actually has been training for mentors for eons, but none of them actually last very long because they're either grant funded or they're something like that, right? So I think if the demand is there that people need training emerges. Once there's a demand, a supply will emerge. And there is a supply, so I would share with you all the things that I'm aware of. The second follow-up question I have for you, Amber, is the idea of reduced fees for the supervisory license. Who's going to pay more? Which level is going to pay more so that the supervisory license can be less?
This is Amber speaking. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
This is Amber speaking. The supervisory license, that's going to be up to the board at this point. Now that it's been passed everything, they're going to determine what those fees are. But I was meaning more of just like there is the cost for all supervisory licenses, and then maybe just a discount for people who are actively supervising. Where that money gets compensated, I don't know. I'm just the idea man.
Yeah, because there's nothing that's free, so it's gonna have to come from somewhere, and I think it has to come from our budget. Correct. Like we have to be a self-sustaining licensing body, right? Yeah.
Heard.
This is Mel. If I was gonna apply for a supervisory license, I will. When I applied for a supervisory license, I paid the extra $150. And then in my business, I then charged licensing fees. I will recoup those costs. That's the cost of building business as a supervisor.
Yep.
So that's kind of on us.
Yep,
I don't think we need to get into the board divvying that up. That's 100%. I'm only gonna apply for that because it's my business.
Exactly.
And I have a nice heart, but mostly it's my business practice. I'm looking at the SLI provisional license, and currently on page 29 of our packet, it says, licensee provisionals to be supervised by, SLI supervisory or generalist until June 30, 2031. So we do have some grace time in here built in to kind of work through some stuff, I think, to figure out some of that programming. And I think the reason I was even looking at provisional license requirements was it says we have to have supervision as to be under SLI supervisory license. So anybody who has the license can provide the supervision. That doesn't necessarily say how many hours the provisional licensee needs to have. I thought we said. I didn't even say term quickly enough.
No, I think it might be a separate section.
Okay, so this is Sammy. 4 minutes, we probably need to have a break, and then we'll have to break into public comment. Okay, it's already 2.
The whole thing about like what it should.
This is Lori. Can I suggest what might be the least popular idea of the day? Would there be value to us meeting prior to July, once Senate Bill 950 presumably is law?
Maybe.
I'm so sorry.
We meet
I'm
before.
suggesting, should we meet
Before the
prior
board.
to the July?
There is some question on when we can actually start working on it. So
Oh,
we're looking at,
okay.
because they put that phrase in there.
The 91 days.
91 days after signing guide, but not actually till end of September, but we're looking at it.
And that would prohibit us from even having discussions
Are you
about
sure
it?
you Tom says.
Shoot.
Looking into it.
Yeah. Okay.
Bumpers. Tentatively,
I see you.
Yeah.
I'm just worried about, again, time, depending on what kind of a timeline we will be on at that point in.
Yeah. So you guys meet July 27th.
Numbers at the top.
We could do like this, could you do like 2 weeks in a row? At 16th and the 23rd, because we still have to take the December meeting and do work. And then, so we have to have some time to like help us out. Or could you do, well, we've just moved right along to scheduling. Here with the program guys. Sorry. So let me back up. Lori asked, could we schedule another meeting before the 23rd of July? And I said, Heather said, yeah, tentatively, yes. We'd like to have it as close to the 23rd as possible, so the 9th, the 16th of July would work for us. We're pretty open in the summer on purpose.
The 9th
July?
works, the 16th does not.
The 9th works for me too.
Okay.
For the additional tentative.
An additional tentative.
This is Amber. I'm available for the 23rd. I will not be available for the 16th.
What about the
What about the
9th?
9th?
The 9th I will be available. Sorry, there's a lot of overlapping conversation. It's kind of hard to
I'm
hear.
out.
Or you could do the week after the 30th.
It is the 30th.
Since the 9th, I'm out of town.
Vacation season, but I can't. July 30th.
I'm available.
Works for me.
No. No, not July
We only
30th.
do Wednesdays?
I could connect remotely on July 30th,
Thursdays or
maybe.
Tuesdays.
Yeah, there are other days available, the 28th,
No, we don't do
21st.
Mondays.
Oh.
No Mondays, no Fridays.
What about the 31st?
Yes,
This is in addition to the 23rd.
yes.
Not coming down to zero.
June on mine.
I can do it.
Yeah.
Wait, that's a lot of driving.
It's really long, I think. Sorry, but.
I'll get my bosses to work.
Yeah, the 24th, the 17th.
Or June, is anybody interested in June?
I would rather do it June.
Well, we have to do a bunch of work before the meeting, and that would not give us enough time with our other ones.
We do, we do have one scheduled for June, right? Sorry, it's still kind of hard to hear you guys. I thought we had one scheduled for June. Are we renegotiating that date right now?
July, just July,
Okay, what was it originally scheduled for?
July 23rd.
Okay, thank you.
I could have Josh pick some dates and get ahold of you guys.
I heard a bunch of yeses for the 31st.
Did you? We're doing a hand tally on the 31st.
June or July?
July. Everybody go home.
June is, I'm free for most of June. July 2nd, 3rd? Yeah. July 14th through 25th, I'm available.
So the 16th, 17th, 15th,
We have the meeting set on the 23rd, so the 16th,
16th.
16th or 17th?
17th is good.
I
We're
am not
gonna do this-
available that entire week. I will be out of town.
Well, we avoid this time here.
13 through 19, I will be available.
I'm out of town that entire week too.
What's the same?
I'm available the first week of July, but not the second week of July.
First week?
First, please.
The first week I could, that week of the 4th.
The 3rd. July 3rd.
Yeah.
That doesn't give us, me enough time.
What is the soonest that you could do?
But not 8th, 9th, 10th.
You can't do the 10th.
Oh, we have temps. Fifth, so 8, 9, preferably 15, 16, 17. August.
What was wrong with 23? I can't remember if somebody had
I think
conflict.
we're keeping that one.
What if we did a back-to-back and did 23,
We're keeping it.
24?
They're looking
Or
at adding an
22,
additional
23.
meeting on top of the 23rd.
They want a new one.
And that way Maya could come and just spend 2 nights. Super easy, right? We did 22, 23, 23, 24. Yeah.
Either 22nd or 24th.
Yeah, do that.
24th. Oh, wait a minute, no, I can't. I can do the
24th.
22nd.
I can do either.
So a 2-day.
July.
Only just-
22nd and 23rd. Not available either of those days.
Maybe we just bag it and plan for the 23rd and see go around. And we can always schedule something in August when schedules start to free up. Does that work? I mean, we can always call an emergency something. I can always say, it's an emergency meeting. So,
Is now a good time for that break?
yes, absolutely. And then we'll, is everyone okay going to public comment after?
So
I feel like we're in a good spot. Ish. Thank you. This time, the Board of Sign Language Interpreters Rules Advisory Committee will hear public and interested parties' feedback. Public comment is limited to matters listed on the meeting agenda or topics relevant to what the committee has statutory authority to regulate. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes, will not be allowed if they are disruptive to the committee's conduct of business. If you are called on to comment, HLO staff will request the public member to unmute themselves. Chairperson and HLO reserve the right to end a person's comment early and have HLO staff mute the public member if the comment does not pertain to matters listed on the meeting agenda or topics relevant to what the committee has statutory authority to regulate. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment? If so, please raise your hand.
We have one person, SG.
SG.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, cool. This is Sharon Gibbons, and I have one clarifying question and then just a couple of comments. On the discussion regarding the supervisory license, I'm not sure if I heard this correctly or not, but it was potentially suggested that if a deaf mentor is going to be mentoring, that they would need to have a supervisory license. Maybe I heard that wrong, but if not, if a deaf person chooses to mentor interpreters, hearing or deaf, or if an interpreter is paying for a deaf mentor, I'm not sure that that is related to licensing. So, like I said, maybe I misheard that, but if I'm having a deaf mentor, I'm not sure that they would need to have a license. So that's just a question, a clarifying question that doesn't need to be answered now. The other thing, again, with the supervisory, I agree with Mel when she said that deaf community engagement is sometimes a problem, and Darcy mentioned that as well. But I'm not sure if under the supervisory, having a number of letters of recommendation or whatever you might call them from deaf people is the way to do that. I mean, right now with 950 passing, generalists have no limit on their renewals. So people that are becoming supervisors are choosing to become supervisors. And by having a large number, 3, 5, whatever, there are a lot of numbers mentioned of having letters of recommendation from deaf folks. Somebody mentioned that that puts a large burden on deaf consumers, and I totally agree with that. But it also, how do we address some sort of a power differential of, an interpreter asking their deaf consumers, would you be willing to write me some letters, a letter, as well as matters of confidentiality. Many folks in the community are working in medical settings, VR clients, that sort of stuff. And I'm not sure how one would go about asking a consumer in those environments if they're willing to write letters of recommendations. And additionally to that, as I said, the supervisory license is now going to become a conscious decision for an interpreter, and adding a large number of additional requirements to get that. I think that there will be a number of people that will choose not to get it, even though they may be great supervisors, mentors, and so forth. So is that, I'm gonna look at my little notes here. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Thank you.
This is Darcy. Thank you for your comments. Going back to what you had said, talking about mentors and figuring out how they were being included or not. The discussion topic, we hadn't decided actually on any of that yet, whether to support or include or not. So, we did notice that the list of things, the things that a person may be able to supervise, under the generalist, whether you're deaf or hearing didn't particularly matter, but as an applicant for supervisory, that was much more limiting to who was already working as an interpreter in the field. That was some of the list of requirements. So in Oregon, I would guess, how many deaf interpreters are there? What, a handful, 3, 4, 5? Which means that the amount those people would be bothered by the surrounding community, hearing community is, changes the dynamics considerably. Now, to be able to recruit other people who are experienced, who could teach, who could support, provide feedback, be a mentor, raters, if those people could be included, they probably wouldn't want to be considered interpreters, but they might be willing to serve in another capacity as a mentor.
Sorry.
Again, Mel and others, have been discussing how to include the deaf community in this. So how? That's the big question that we return to. That's where the wheels are turning as we open this discussion here today. There was no solid decision made for now, but hopefully we'll have continuing discussion in the future.
Well, just to add one little piece of it, I guess I'm saying that I don't know why we would require deaf mentors to get a license at all, period, end of. I mean, that's
right.
These are interpreting licenses. They're not mentoring licenses. And then one little note that I forgot to add is there are a number of people all across the country, deaf folks, who are serving as mentors. They're professional mentor type folks who put those services out there, often for a fee, as they should. So, adding that piece of needing to show mentoring and so forth, just it's very broad mentoring stuff. And I, for one, don't think that somebody who's choosing, bless their hearts, to mentor interpreters should have a license at all. It's a wholly different, it's a separate thing. And like I said, maybe I misunderstood that situation. A deaf interpreter who's mentoring, supervising, sure, a license, but just deaf folks that are out there mentoring interpreters, I'm not sure that they need a license. And again, maybe I misunderstood that part of the conversation. And thank you very much.
Can I respond? This is Amanda. I don't think the conversation was that they would have to be supervised, have to have a license, as much as we were trying to see what there a pathway for them to be supervised, to be licensed, I guess the wrong word. So I don't think any of our discussion was they would have to be, but we wanted to see if there was a way they could be if they wanted to serve in that capacity. So thank you for that.
One, two, three. Any other comments? Okay. Meeting adjourned at 2:28.